You're listening to the AV-IT Amplifier. Each week, we'll feature voices and ideas that need to be amplified in the higher education and pro-AV IT communities. This show is brought to you by higheredav.com. And now here's your host, Ryan Gray.
Quick intro, we are back this week with part 2 of the takeover of this show where Chris Dechter turns the tables on me as the guest. If you made it through the rambling first episode, congratulations and thank you for coming back. We pick up our conversation right where it left off last week.
Yes.
Yeah.
So.
But yeah.
That's a good point. And to your last point there about find someone who's an expert and figure out what you need to do to become that person. Not in the way of like a Lifetime movie of the week where you're killing somebody and then taking their place. I don't mean that. Or a David Fincher film. I don't mean that. But so that was kind of my experience in, I don't know, this 10 plus years ago. I remember working with a consultant on a new building project. And I thought, wow, this person really has, really has their knowledge, or really has their stuff together, really has good knowledge in this. They really know what they're talking about. How do I get to that sort of role? And it was looking at what sort of certifications, what sort of courses I need to take, what sort of degrees, that sort of thing, and growing towards that. And it's nice to have certain letters after your name that when you throw stuff back in an email to an entire project team, that they're like, oh, right or wrong, I better listen to this person and at least make it look like I read their email, because otherwise they're going to call me on it. And it's clear that whether in this particular case they know what they're talking about, they at least have some credentials to back up what they're saying. So
yeah, exactly. Like in our world, AV system programming, no one can put can make it seem like a mysterious, really hard thing to do, because we have programmers, right? I'm a Crestron certified programmer. I worked hard to get that certification, and you can't, I'm a Crestron certified architect. I'm a CTS. I have a master's degree, and that's not to blame. Like to that point, the part is, I have a master's degree in educational technology. It's in instructional design with an emphasis on educational leadership. So when I sit down with an AVP to talk about developing a new program, we try and deal with that as peers, even though we work in IT. Same thing exists in technical realms. Let's go be that. And I would add, here's my hot take of the day. If you work at a college that actively dissuades, it's not only do they not provide you opportunities to have that kind of growth, but that suppresses it, that says that's not in your lane, that's not in your whatever. My advice would be don't work at that school anymore. Go find one that will, because one of the things that is important to me and my institution, one of the reasons I've stayed at my institution 10 years now and chosen to keep on it is the support that ongoing professional development is a key tentpole of what we do. And the support in time and finances to do it is an investment in taking care of our students. And for everyone that can say that with a straight face, there's 10 people that say, God, I wish I could work somewhere like that. And my hot take of the day is, if you don't work like somewhere like that, keep your eye out and go find a place that does it. And if you are looking at jobs, make sure you understand the culture of advancement and the culture of professional development wherever you're going before you get there, because there's no salary high enough to trade off the ability to better yourself.
Sure there is.
Well, no, there is. Oh, the last
Brian, if I say you're going to stay in a box and do nothing of important all day, don't learn anything, and here's $10 million a year.
It'd drive me crazy. But you know what I'm saying? Like, maybe, yeah, but that actually sounds like kind of a miserable existence. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't need $10 million bucks.
You're not wrong from the standpoint of personal development and that sort of thing. You're not wrong. And if we think realistically that there is no salary great enough, within the normal range of salaries.
Yeah.
In fact, I have a question on that coming up here.
No problem.
Within the normal range of salaries, you're right. There's not a salary high enough to be held back by poor policy, we'll just say. So
yeah, the old saying was,
I won't
say, if a good salesman doesn't sell you one car today, they want to sell you 3 cars over 5 years. So when you're looking at an institution, don't always make it about the first position, right? The question is, where can I be at this institution in 5 or 10 years versus what will it be today? And if you come in, this isn't exactly where I wanted to start, but I can see the track record of advancement at this place. The people I'm interviewing with are on their 3rd promotion in 10 years since they've been there, versus they're all hired from the outside or they've been in the same position for a long time. Use that as part of your.
They've all worked here for 2 weeks. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if they've all worked there for 2 weeks, that's a whole other thing.
And there's plenty of opportunity. So
yeah.
I won't say which. I mean, as people know, I tend to travel around the country quite a bit, but I have worked at schools that have actively said, no, we're not going to support your, professional development. We're not going to pay for that. We're not going to allow you to attend that course or take that workshop or go to the training or whatever. And I won't say which, because it's not all of them. In fact, it's only a couple of them, but I don't work at those schools anymore. So.
Yeah.
Where I am now, I have yet to be turned down for any sort of budgetary request related to travel or professional development, whatever. And I even tell my team, I expect you to spend about 10% of your time, which honestly becomes difficult. And that's a good problem to have. I'm being told you should be spending, 3 to 4 hours a week on this stuff. I'm having trouble finding time to do that because we've got other stuff going on, but that's a good problem to have in the sense where it's not being told, no, you can't go learn that course, but no, go take that online course if you can do it in chunks, or if you want to sign up for a couple of day long training course that needs to basically take you, quote unquote, out of the office while you're in the office or whatever that is. That's fine. I encourage that because it only makes you a more active participant in your field, a better expert in your field, and a better, for lack of a better term, employee, a staffer, a better contributor to your institution.
Yeah, I would agree. I think, the law of supply and demand is at work, whether people want to acknowledge it or not. And the law of supply and demand for your talent exists. So maximize it. Don't sell yourself shorter of where it can be. And to your point, it's hard, it's awkward. The fear of change is difficult people can get comfortable at a particular institution and they only see their future there. But I would just encourage people to have an open mind about what all is out there. And then the other thing is, but one of the things you hear a lot at schools or other institutions that are kind of suppressive with training, and again, it's not mine. This is a famous thing what if we give all this training to our people and they leave and go somewhere else, right? And the response is, well, dear God, what if we don't train them and they stay? Right. I would way rather have 3 years of a really good person than 10 years of one not well trained. Right. As a leader, as someone who I've spent a lot of my time hiring now. I have a manager coming on board in 10 days. And if he comes on board and nothing happens, that'll be the first time since I've taken my current role that all of my full-time positions will have been full at the same time. Right. I understand the feeling of turnover and that sort of thing is a challenge, but find a place with a leader that understands that you'd rather have a great person for a short amount of time and move your group forward than have people that, you're not investing in stay for a long time.
Well, it also gives you the opportunity to let's say influence that successful person's career path. That if I'm going to have somebody on my team for 2 or 3 years and they're really, really motivated and really high performing, and they go off to some other institution or some other organization, then I hope that they're taking some of my BS with them, and that they might then continue to be a proponent of that, of my constant misdirection and lies.
There you go. Exactly.
All right. So let's see. Where's my question? I was going to follow up here on. I said I had a question about that, and I can't remember what it was. But oh well.
I mean, you do.
So I'll go back to my
podcast,
list,
right? I mean, come on, man.
Yeah, there's notes, man.
I know.
Not in
There's notes.
Order,
go to the notes.
All right. So let's go. I'm going to kind of bounce around here. We'll go with something a little more less work related, a little more personal. But what's one lie that you tell about yourself routinely to others?
Oh.
For example, in those stupid everybody introduce yourself discussions at large meetings, people often ask us to provide something interesting about a recent vacation or a hobby or whatever. So what's a lie that you tell maybe about that or about yourself? I mean, that to the point where you've got it down so well when people ask that, you've got a response that sounds good, it sounds reasonable, like, yeah, that makes sense, completely made up.
Wow, that is a great. So here's how it goes. I go, wow, that's a great question, and your response should be, of course, it's a good question. I asked it. So
No, my response would be, that's not a great question. But
no, that is a great question. So, man, one that is totally made up, I would have a real hard time coming up with something that's totally out
we
of
go with a
cloth.
half truth where you take something and you blow it completely out of proportion because it sounds better.
Yeah, that's the key, is how is the description of past things that are colored, right, to make them more dramatic, right, based on true events. But also, I think for me, and I'll be honest, I mean, even in this podcast where I start to say things like, collecting data, and I have to qualify, like, I'm not saying I'm doing this, is I will often
just saying it's a good idea.
Yeah, but I'm oftentimes present not just who am I, but what is the idealized version, with the idea that I'll never make it there. So, that's a good question, because it really puts you in a place of, how vulnerable do you really want to be about things? I have I've talked about it, so I don't mind saying it again. Like, in working with a therapist, one of the things I've put together is kind of the 10 principles that govern, like, who I want to be. And in my last session, one of the things I had to do was rate how do I think I'm doing on a scale of 1 to 10 on these. And some of them were like under 5, right? But if I'm talking about myself, I'm probably talking about myself as if I am achieving in all of those areas, right? So one of the descriptors in there is empathetic, right? Is somebody who really and truly sees another person's situation and calibrates how they interact with that person to that person's needs and wants. But it's one of those things, like, how many times in retrospect do you look back and go, yeah, I definitely didn't do that well. Those aren't the ones I'm afraid of. It's all the times that I'm not doing that well, and I don't even realize that I'm not doing it well, that are really kind of scary. That, that I'm places where you're not being patient, you're not showing empathy, you're not doing those things, and you don't even later realize that you're not doing a good job of it. It's the things I am blind to about myself that I think are really scary. So going back to your question, I think, I like to tell stories about things I did when I was in live event, and it's always, a little more access to the A-list celebrity than really existed at the time. I like, things that we went through that had high security or Secret Service and that sort of thing. And there's you tell the story.
So you're telling me you didn't really get stuck driving Vince Neil to the airport because you missed the bus.
Right. It wasn't that bad. I'll tell you this. I have told the story about green M&Ms, that Sheryl Crow requests green M&Ms on her rider for the same reason that everyone has green M&Ms. But I was reminded by somebody that it wasn't actually Sheryl Crow that did it. It was someone in Sheryl Crow's band, and it was a particular Verdi salsa that was on their rider, not green M&Ms. And I would have sworn under oath at some point that, oh yeah, no, that happened. Sheryl Crow definitely had a bowl of green M&Ms on her rider, and I was reminded by somebody that wasn't actually the case. So I don't know. That's probably not a good answer. So the SO,
because you didn't give us our lie. What's the lie, man?
I don't like. So here's the problem. I'll bet there are.
Let's set the scenario. We're in one of these big, it's an all IT thing. It's an all hands. It's a regional event, whatever it is. And someone stands up, and it's always my indication of somebody who is not prepared or is not really the right person to be leading whatever they're doing. And they say, let's all go around the room and introduce ourselves.
Yeah.
Because first of all, that's going to blow like 15 minutes, and we're only there for like 60 minutes. So,
right.
And secondly, I don't care. And people have probably seen this when I've talked about it a lot, that I don't care about introductions. I don't care who you are, whatever. Give me your name, give me where you work and what you're doing. And that's enough for me for today, because usually we're there for a work event, and that's fine. I just need to frame that conversation. I don't care how many horses you have. I don't care where you last went on vacation. I don't care about your favorite ice cream. I don't care about all that. If you're wasting my time, move on. So
right.
In that sort of scenario, and you have to like quickly, you've got like 5 or 6 people before they come to you, and you're gonna have to come up with some sort of like pithy thing that sounds interesting, but is also uninteresting enough for people to forget immediately. What's the lie? Okay.
So I will, all right, I will admit one here, which is, if it has to be, so if the thing is, tell us something, about you, and I will always want to answer that question with something really off the wall, right? Not, like you said, how many I have 12 dogs, this is my dog's name or whatever.
Right.
And And so one of the things I even referenced it a little earlier in the podcast, which was during COVID, I was on a school board, and there was a particular school board meeting where there was a very heavy topic being discussed. And there was
like gravity heavy.
Discussing
gravity.
And like I said, I won't make light of it because it was really hard. It was scary. It was one of those where like there were police there, and the board members had an evacuation plan. Like we knew where to go to get off the stage if we had to get off the stage. It was high energy. It was physical. It was very palpable in the room. And there was a person who came up in a break and did come up to me and put their finger in my face and made some threats. And I have repeated, I have said in this sort of thing a couple of times that one of the things they said was, you know what I'm saying? I know where you live. I know where you live. And I have thought about it since, and that isn't like, it's not something the person said. They did make some other threats, but I know where you live makes it feel like they threatened my family, and they didn't. And I don't know if that's like a distinction that's worth making or not, but I realize in order to heighten repeating that story, I have put words in someone's mouth that they didn't actually say in order to because this thing makes me like, look at me, I'm a victim. I was being threatened, and all I was doing there is serve the public. Like it bolsters that whole thing. And it was absolutely a significant, it was a heightened emotional thing. So it's right there in your brain. But even at that, there are parts of it that there is probably times I would have sworn that was that my family was brought into that conversation. And I really, you know what I'm saying? I know that that's not the case, but I have repeated it as if it were. So I don't know. That's probably a weird answer, that a little more heavy than you're looking for, but I
was going to say, is that what you'd share at one of these terrible, everyone go around and introduce yourself meetings? But
it depends, right? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like you want to hear something really like that. I love the answers where you really learn something that like, you're like, wait a second. No, you know what I'm saying? Like, if I talk to you and you're like, yeah, I've been to the Crestron headquarters, the QSC headquarters, and I've been to the headquarters of 10 major manufacturers, I'd be like, yeah, of course you have. No big deal on that. But if you came and said, I'm actually
count and see how many I've been to, because it may be close to that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But if you came back and be like, ironically, I'm actually the third cousin to Francis Ferdinand, and it's half my fault that World War I started. I'd be like, yeah, well, no, either. Yeah, exactly. The band or the other. But yeah, like what is the weird off the wall thing? You know what I'm saying? That you wouldn't expect about somebody is kind of, is sometimes to me like that is fodder for a future conversation rather than something like, I would kind of already know that about you.
I'll just say from my perspective, I haven't been through a bunch of these things, and I won't share my lie because then you're not sure which one it is. I have 2 or 3 kind of pat answers that I have for those sorts of things. Tell us something interesting you've done recently. I have 2 or 3 that I rotate through, not a single one of which is true.
Oh, yeah.
Or are they?
I should cultivate that better. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like,
I figured you would have one. You'd have been like, oh, it's that we have 7 dogs and we go to the national Boston Terrier Championship every year or something. So.
Now, I'm not organized enough to have something put together like that. But
because if you said something like that, I'm just saying most people in the room would be like, yeah, okay, I can see that.
Right. Well, people will not quite. I love putting people on in things like that. Like there was a time where, and again, I was a less mature person. I was in that other company, and we're the salesperson with this really fancy restaurant, and he's ordering salmon. And he gets into the waiter about, is this, I'm ordering this filet, but I need to know is it from the left side of the fish or the right side of the fish? And the guys go, wait, why do you need to know that? He's like, well, this particular breed of salmon, this is lives south of the equator. And in the south of the equator, all the mercury actually goes to the left fillet, but in the northern hemisphere, it goes to the right fillet. And so depending on the species of salmon, I need to know whether it's from the left or the right, and had him going for a while. And in the long run, he's just being mean to the poor waiter. I thought it was hysterical. The other thing we used to do when I did live event stuff at a hotel, everybody wanted to, they had to get a projector and a screen for their little meeting, but the rental rates are really expensive. And if anybody tells me they're egregious, I will fight you because you don't know what the business on the backside of that looks like. It's terrible. But everybody's question was, oh, I don't need to rent a screen. We'll just project on the wall. And what we used to tell people is actually you can't, we don't do that because you wouldn't think of it. But if you project on the wall, even for a day, it will actually, how, the image on the ATM gets burned in where you can see the letters, from the welcome screen all the time. The same thing happens on the wallpaper. It'll actually discolor the wallpaper if you project onto the wall. And and there were people that would actually believe that enough. They go, oh yeah, okay, yeah, that's no problem. I'll rent the screen too.
I like that answer. By the way, I'm going to start using that on campus when people are like, we don't need a screen. We're just going to project onto the whiteboard.
No, it'll discolor the whiteboard.
Yeah. No, your whatever image you leave up there is going to get burned in. You have to replace that. So,
it will. Yeah, exactly. And it's a problem. Like, look, I'm on your side here. Like, we're just trying to make it work for you. So
help me help you.
Help you.
All right. Let's see. I'm being cognizant of time here that we're coming up on an hour. I do want to keep this going for another 2 or 3, but
sure.
I'm going to jump around on questions to try to balance maybe a work-related versus a personal one, just to kind of make it more difficult for you to figure out how you split this episode up. Good luck with that.
No problem.
All right, here you go. All right. Let's see. Where's the one I'm looking for here? I can't find it. Here it is. I have it backwards. I want you to throw some cold water on higher ed AV. What's something that we as a community need to hear? Tough love time. Go.
Well, okay. So the low hanging fruit for me on that is, AV and IT are not equal. So we talk about, I'm saying, oh, I'm an AV person, I'm an IT person, right? And even you mentioned like the Venn diagrams, and I think there's this perception that they're equal sized circles. They're not. And we make a mistake by talking about it that way. In fact, we make a big mistake in talking about IT people as IT people, because I promise you, someone who does endpoint management and someone who does network infrastructure, they don't consider themselves the same thing either, right? They consider that, those are two very different roles. Those are two very different jobs. And we make a mistake by lumping people who aren't AV as IT. We would do better to understand and to accept that AV is a critical expertise in the overall IT field. Take our place in that, and from there build forward. So I don't know if that's cold water on something, but I think
it is.
It's a very I think the long run of keep AV doesn't serve our community. It doesn't serve. It'll be fine for people your age and my age. It will not serve the people coming behind us. It will not serve to kind of go like, look, we're AV, we're different than them. You know what I'm saying? It will serve us better to expand what we mean by us to include more people, to include a wider array of people who work in technology for the benefit of education, and to cast that net as wide as we can, because the wider we cast it, the more long-term good we can do, and the better we can actually advance our own missions that we think are important, if that makes sense. I think the other thing is, I would say, is I think AV people aren't doing enough to influence the direction of their entire institutions. So, and again, this is a tall order that I will admit the privilege I have of saying this from the institution that I say it in. For instance, in IT leadership, in higher ed IT leadership, a huge topic is about projecting influence, is that, a CIO should not be the director of the IT department. The CIO should be the management level technology consultant for the president of a college. They should be at the table directing the overall, direction of the entire institution, not just providing the technology tools to adapt to the direction that other leaders have said. And AV people have way too much to offer for us to sit and wait to, employ the visions that other people have brought to institutions, if that makes sense.
That's a good point. I mean, it's all about thinking and acting strategically, not tactically. Though I really did like what you said at the beginning. You started to stray away from it. I don't know if you tried to back off from it, or if it was
maybe
just naturally where you went. But that AV and IT are not equal, and they are not.
Right.
And they are very much not. AV is one tiny little cog in the larger IT structure, I guess. One that people will quickly subsume because they think, as to my earlier question, that we're just hanging TVs,
right,
and then go buy that stuff from Amazon and just throw it in a room and it's fine. And the problem with that is, in a lot of cases, it actually is good enough to get the job done. Now, is it actually speaking to all the different things that a true AV expert would be bringing to the table? No. But is it, can I see and hear the people in my meeting, in my presentation, whatever? Can I get my PowerPoint up there? If so, then they're kind of eating your lunch. So be prepared for terrible UCC IT style things to show up in spaces on your campus, and for you to have to make them work with other stuff.
Yeah. And to that point, I would say, like, again, I'll beat a dead horse on it, but if you're, that fear is always right. Some, like you said, UCC IT solution gets pitched to your CIO, and your CIO, buys it, and all of a sudden you've got it on your campus and you didn't choose it. The best way to avoid that is to make sure that you are the CIO. And I know that's kind of a simplistic way to say it, but you know what I'm saying? But to that point, that same threat exists for all other tent poles of IT, right? That some company that's, we come in and we can solve all your networking challenges from the outside, and a CIO hears it. They have to live in the same realm. We make a mistake by not making sure we have a chair at that same table, and by not evaluating those UCC IT solutions and if and where they should have a role, simply because, that they are IT solutions, therefore they shouldn't be considered. Where are they good enough? You know what I'm saying? Which ones are good enough to be good enough, and which ones, would allow you to take resources elsewhere? That's kind of, if that's strategic thinking or whatever. Like if there's a conference room that in the past had to have, a custom built system, custom programming, and hours and hours spent on tuning IT, yada, yada, yada. And now there are people coming in that say, look, I've got a sound bar with AI built in, and it can do 80% of all of that, and it costs 20%. And we say, well, we should not even look at that because, it's not true AV. Then what would you as an AV person do with that rest of that money that now you don't have to spend on that one thing? Is there another area you might be able to use that where you go, okay, this thing that's sort of auto magic is 80% as good as if I put my whole thing into it, and I've got 10 of those rooms. If I can have half of the revenue from those 10 rooms to put into a larger space that needs a good custom thing that can upgrade somewhere else across the board, how do you maximize everything you have? I don't know. I'll throw that. Maybe that's a little cold water. That's a betrayal of the AV community to say, yeah, maybe there's an auto magic IT that's actually worth considering. But there are some out there that are worth considering. There are some of them that are pretty good.
I don't disagree. Honestly, there are some, and I will phrase this very carefully, there are some good enough consumer-ish IT-centric solutions that do have a place and can play nice with the larger common kit of parts and ecosystem you may have on your campus. So you're exactly right. If I have I'll give an example. If you have that 8-person conference room, you don't need to force in we're going to start with the all-in-one switcher and a touch panel, and we're going to build out, no, you don't need that when there are solutions out there for much, much lower in cost that'll get the job done, and you'll never hear from those people ever again because it'll just be working. And I think that's a valid response for the right scenario.
And I think it speaks to when I say laser focused on user experience. Sometimes in AV, we get focused on our own perception of the quality of a room and not our users' perception of the quality of the room, right? We know that we could go in and go, yeah, like there is a difference between this all-in-one solution and what I could build in here. But if the average person, or the fat part of the bell curve of people who are going to use the room truly won't perceive the difference, then are we making the right decision by holding out for what only the small tail of people would perceive in there versus using those resources in another place? Stay laser focused on the user experience, and don't get caught in the trap of of our own. Like we hear things at concerts that other people don't hear. I get that. We spend our life listening to a sound and audio in detail. In the long run, if it's a conference room and they can make out the words of the people on the other side, and to your point, the technology disappears because it's the conversation that takes over, that's what we're there to do. And if somebody can hand us that and it's quick and it's easy and it's plug and play, sometimes just, you know what I'm saying, take it, give it a shot. If it really works for people, roll that out there and spend your expertise on the spaces that really, really need expertise. So I don't know. There you go. There's your hot take.
It's a good point. It's a good point. I mean, I think you're not wrong for the right scenario. And maybe it's not, and you said something there at the very end, which actually struck home. Maybe it's not financial resources to be spent elsewhere. Maybe it's time. Yeah. Maybe it's expertise. Maybe it's my staff's time. They don't have to spend time, they don't have to spend 4 days building out that conference room when we could go drop it off and, plug in a few things, hang a thing on the wall, do whatever, and be in and out of there in 3 hours. And then we can spend our time on something else.
100%.
You don't need to overthink it. And I think we've all got those spaces that you walk into, especially those of us who inherited a campus, and you're just like, what the heck? I would love to have been a fly on the wall when this was getting discussed, because wow. And then we get to, I've done things where I've taken out a bunch of stuff from a space, and it works way better because you don't need all this stuff in here. So.
Yeah. Like the holistic look at resources is 100% true. It's why when I say it that way, yeah, like, and not just from the install point of view, but what is the life cycle support of it look like, right? How many trouble calls are you going to get to a thing is an all-in-one sound bar plugged directly into a computer? If you get them, you got to get the thing out of there. But yeah, like how many hours of people's expertise will you spend on it? And I think that's a key thing to remember.
That's a great thing to keep in mind as you're working on projects, especially, and I'll just be broad about it, especially those smaller spaces, the simpler spaces where they don't need, I'm going to put in the beam tracking microphone array and the auto steering cameras and
right.
The farthest person at the end of the table, the dean, the chair, whoever's going to come in, she sits 14 feet from the screen, put in a sound bar and an auto framing camera, be done, walk away. So
yeah, cool.
All right, I've got two more questions. Well, one's a question, one's just a comment. So let me give you your last question here. Then this one more of just kind of a personal one. What's a major pet peeve of yours? What really grinds your gears? And feel free to say me. To say you.
No, I can answer this question, and I'll give it to you in context of work. And this exists probably in lots of field, but in technology exists, which is the false bravado of one-upsmanship of technical knowledge or something like that, right? That always like, the well actually moments, where somebody says, oh, something X, well, actually, that version doesn't support the blah, 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 blah. And it goes to the idea of that I can show my importance by showing that you're not important, or I can show my knowledge by showing the other person maybe doesn't have knowledge, or, to prey on that sort of thing. It exists in technology. It exists in all areas, but that's sort of like the idea that, especially if people are on the same team, that you can have any success outside of team success is a huge pet peeve. And I guess that probably goes beyond pet peeve, because it's not an annoyance. To me, that's a fundamental challenge. That is a fundamental challenge that holds groups and teams back, which is the idea that I can distinguish myself by showing that I'm better than somebody else, that I'm getting credit for something, that I'm, that I build myself up by pulling somebody else down. It doesn't work that way. And as one of the reasons why I think, whether, IT people need to climb is, it goes along the line with my experience of a lot of AV people, is there is a little bit more of a team aspect. There's a little bit more of a sense of community. I find like-minded people all over the country that have that kind of sense of community. And the more we can amplify that, the better off everyone will be in that. And as I choose, I will 100 times hire somebody for a management position that needs to get from a 3 technical expertise to an 8 technical expertise in that field, if they already understand the concept that their success is their team success, rather than their own success, because that is worth way more than, than any technical certification that somebody has. The ability to make the people around you better for the quality of the whole is far more valuable than any particular piece of technology that somebody really knows. So, I don't know. Is that also, what else is a pet peeve? When people don't laugh at me when I'm, when I'm doing, when people, like, I don't know, like the false front of like status or stature kind of makes me crazy a little bit. It will make people crazy, but like, I'll, if I see the presidents of the college walk by, I'll holler something from the corner. Like, you have to have the relationship to do it, but everyone's a person. So people who use titles or other things in a way to kind of suppress other people around them and that sort of thing, that's a big turnoff. I don't, you know what I'm saying? That,
not sure I've run into that. I mean, I guess I could probably think of examples of that, but I do that in reverse. If someone is being a, let's say someone is really upset, and at a certain point, it's all your responsibility. And when you're in leadership, so when there is a let's just say a support issue, at a certain point, it's going to get to you. I will often look up that person, see if they are indeed a true expert in their field. They have their doctorate, they have their terminal degree, and I will refer to them in a very formal manner, which usually diffuses things immediately. Yeah. Even to the point where if they were responding, because they're all email warriors or telephone tough guys at a certain point, but they're responding like, oh crap, this is a real person. This is somebody who's responding to me. They're helping out. They're going to meet me tomorrow, whatever it is. And they will sign their email signature. They'll sign it as Steve or Sally or whoever. I will still refer to them as Dr. Such and Such for a couple more emails, just to kind of remind them that I know who they are and I'm going to recognize that. So
I agree. It's that kind of like, it's, again, there are people who are experts in that sort of thing, but when whatever level of stature you've earned allows you to stop treating other people as other human beings with the same value that you have, that is the part that really gets me, if that makes sense.
Oh no, I don't disagree. I'm just saying that sometimes you just let them go, but
and then you can use it sarcastic. Oh, doctor or something. Oh, I see. How dare I,
Well, I just keep track of those people and I take them off the Christmas list. So.
That's true. I do. If there is a person with a PhD or something like that, I do try to refer to them as doctor. And then if I can add in from Austin Powers, I would say they didn't go to evil medical school to be called Mr. Thank you very much. So, you know what I'm saying?
Trying to force that one.
Yeah.
All right. Last one. It's not a question. It's more of just more of a comment, more of a thank you. You presented at NWMET last year, the far superior to Enterprise Connect conference. And honestly, I can't remember what you presented on, but you were talking about staff meetings and specifically about when to hold those, when not to hold those, and about sending out a pre-meeting survey. Yeah. A little kind of a questionnaire, a little thing. You throw in some serious questions, some not so serious questions, just to see if people are reading or whatnot. I'm just going to say I've been doing that since shortly thereafter. I think maybe about a month after that one, I changed all my staff meetings to monthly instead of weekly, because honestly, it felt like just not a great use of time. I involved the entire teams, full-time and part-time people in that one. And I do send out, in fact, I sent it out today for our meeting on Friday, a pre-meeting survey with kind of those standard questions about how are things going? And do you know who to go to for help? Or, hey, we stood up this new system. Do you know how it operates? And I bring it up at the beginning of each meeting to show people what the responses are, because it is anonymous. I don't know who said what to it. And I think people really have taken to that. But I will say personally, again, just more as a thank you, that this is a great idea. And if you're not doing this, and would give you a soapbox here for a moment or so to maybe explain why you started doing it, or maybe you stole it from somebody else. But this is a great way to kind of cue people up for a staff meeting, so that it will give you a little more, give a little more personal touch to it, or something that you're not just going to read down a list of items on an agenda that you need to make people aware of. Like it's time for them to renew their university motor vehicle certifications or whatnot, which is important, and you have to bring that up. But maybe it gives a little more personal touch to it, and it makes people seem like a little more of a human in these things.
Well, I appreciate that. And I love, like, it's cool to hear, like, you mean you give a presentation, somebody actually listens and then puts something in practice? Yeah, no, I
The thing
agree.
is, I can't remember what the presentation was about. I
Yeah.
just remember that thing from it. So it may
I
have
could
been
look
about
up
like
the
things to
title
never
of it.
do in your staff meetings. And
No, it was that yeah, the crux of that was kind of about, it had a little bit of a management thing to it. It was about recruiting and retaining staff was kind of what they were looking for, and sort of the methods that we try and use to increase employee engagement and make our place a great place to work. But yeah, like, so I the two concepts that you're talking about there is, first is to put all of your people together on one place is a huge, regardless of the size of your team. You're talking about 100% commitment of whatever. So if you've got a team of 3 people, that's, if you have all 3 there, that's 100% of your capacity you're taking offline. You're putting a lot of hours into it. It needs to be worth it. Don't do it just because you think you're supposed to do it. And the other thing I would suggest is don't do it just to have people give updates on what they're working on. That is by definition, a meeting that could be an email, right? I think if you're going to put that level of investment in person hours into it, it needs to affect something important. And by important, I don't know, like you said, you can run down, make sure you renew your thing, or time cards have to be in by yada, yada, yada. To me, the important work you're trying to do there is understand the people and make change going forward. And getting discussions going is always easier to start when you have a place to start from. So I do the same. I did this past Friday, and for me, they're called all hands. So I have 4 managers under me, and they each have their teams, and they have their own team meetings. My meetings that include everybody there, we're down to about every 6 weeks or so. I won't gather everybody any more frequent than that, because it's a big investment in time and effort. And it's taking 4 departments offline for that amount of time to do it. But this last one, the theme was taking a look back at a year, because it had been just about a year since the first of those all hands meetings I had done. And so I did a pre-survey, and it had 3 questions, which is true or false, you've worked here for a year, true or false, you think we're better than we were a year ago, true or false, you think we'll be better a year from now than we are. And that became the basis for discussion. And the difference between someone who had come in partway through the year of their perception of those things, and it was not unanimous on people's answers, and they were anonymous, but it gave a place for people to start having that discussion, and for people to be able to hear each other's voices and understand what was going on. And then I did have a PowerPoint. What I did was pull up the PowerPoint that I had used at that meeting 1 year ago. And we said, all right, let's take a look at this snapshot in time and compare it to where we are today. And then I added those screens were all in white, and then the updated ones were in green. So it was, here was our org chart a year ago, here it is today. What do we think? Did we go in the right direction? What has it allowed us to do and not do? And keep those discussions on that higher level of, like we said, strategy, direction, vision, rather than operations, if I'm going to put everybody in the same room.
Well, I just think it's a great approach to doing that, because it does lay the groundwork. It does kind of cue people up for what we're going to be talking about, and maybe just get some general feedback on things before you even get in there. So rather than, like, especially if it's a larger group, you've got, in my case, if I have the entire team there, I'd have 17 people in the room. And if I were to ask them all, let's go around the room and tell me what you think about this,
100%.
You're going to get maybe only honest feedback from half of those people. Maybe only half are going to want to say, and then you're going to get the people who are like, I agree with what they said, because, I don't care. But I can do that in a survey ahead of time and say, look, 86% of people said, and that 86% may not even be all 17. It may only be 12 or 15, but 86% of those who responded said this, and that sets the stage for the discussion. Yes. So,
and even on a basic level,
great approach.
You can get things out of the way that don't have to take time. So for Infocom last year, we submitted a presentation that was a panel presentation, right? And it got picked up. So now we got to do the planning for it. And everyone in there is from a different school. Everyone's busy. Nobody has time to have many, many meetings. So I did the same thing before our first planning meeting. A thing went out, and it was, should we have slides or not? Should people introduce themselves, or do you want to be introduced by the moderator? You know what I'm saying? Should we do it? And it had like the 10 things that you would need to get worked out on that first meeting with that poll. And all of them ended up with a consensus. So meeting number 1 actually became meeting number 2, because everything you'd work out in meeting number 1 got worked out in the survey, and we were able to just move on past that. So sometimes you could just, like, to your point, man, you can move on to level 2 right away by, taking level 1 into, let's say, an asynchronous method rather than a synchronous method, which, our online instructors teach us to do and point us in the right direction on.
Again, just kind of a great, I don't know if this was your concept or not, but I'll give you credit for it until you identify that it was somebody else.
God, I am confident I stole that or saw it from somewhere, but I cannot think of what. I don't think I've ever had an original idea, so I'm not claiming that it was my idea, just something that has proven to be effective.
There you go. Well, Ryan, this has been a reverse episode of the AV-IT Amplifier. I'll let you figure out if you're cutting this thing up into 6 episodes or if this is just one really, really long one. But I think this has been fun. This has been educational for me. I have a list of questions we didn't even get to because we've been here far too long and they've already stopped listening. That's fine. Yeah. So, but I think this was an interesting way to flip the show around and turn the focus onto you, who's usually on the other side of the microphone, and now people know a little bit more about you and your approach to technology leadership and your terrible lies that you tell
exactly
all the time.
But you never know how deep my legs. Chris, thank you. I appreciate it. I would jump on a phone call and talk to you for 2 hours, regardless if we were recording or not. And I really, I do a podcast really because I like asking questions of other people, and I like learning about them. But as you can tell here, I also like talking about me. So I appreciate the idea, and I appreciate all the help that you and the guidance that you have been in starting it, in participating in it, and in helping me, get something off the ground that has been a really worthwhile thing for me over the past, 6 months or so.
Well, and hopefully it's been professionally rewarding as well, because you get to talk to a lot of cool people in the industry. And for those of us who get to listen to the show, we get to listen to you talking to a lot of interesting people in the industry and finding out a lot more about them that you had no idea.
Cool. Thank you for listening.
I'm just wondering when Jimmy's going to write you a theme song, because I believe that came up.
Thinking about that. It's a ballad.
Where the heck is your theme song?
So. Hey, everybody, look up. Jimmy does have a SoundCloud. He hasn't. The stuff on there's a little old.
Does he really?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm checking
look
that
up Jimmy
out
Singleton on SoundCloud. I did go find it.
Go heckle him there. So
exactly.
Well, let's do reverse. So free plug time, Ryan. How can people find out more about you? Where can they reach out? Where can they find you?
Sure. Twitter at Ryan_A_Gray, and find me on LinkedIn. You search Ryan Gray. There's a bunch, but if you put in HETMA or Yavapai or higher ed, you'll find me. Please get connected.
I think the higher ed one's a little broad, isn't it? To just search for Ryan Guy higher ed.
Higher ed. You'll find me eventually in there. Or here's a better thing. Dechter is a harder word. So find Chris, and then from Chris you find me.
I tell people that same thing. So you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm the only Dechter that counts out there. There's not many of us, and if there's anybody with a similar name, I will find them down and kill them. Kind of Highlander style on the top of a building during a rainstorm. So
yes.
I'm going to give a free plug for AV Super Friends. So avsuperfriends.com. We do a bunch of random shows. We just released one this morning on the day we're recording this, which is the 30th. So happy Halloween. Okay. We released one this morning where we discuss AI and discuss then AI kind of in a specific sense and then in a broad sense, but we keep it in realistic terms, not in the highfalutin marketing terms. I think that was a fun discussion. Mm-hmm. We just did our Halloween special. We released that one last week, which we went completely in on a fully scripted episode. I've never done that before. And we've already recorded our Thanksgiving episode, which is not scripted. It's just more kind of a fun discussion on let's just say some AV turkeys. Nice. Things that didn't quite work out.
Well, I said the Halloween episode is a must listen because you've got me ready to buy some Amalgamated Industries frustration mounts. Or if I didn't get that right, that was fantastic. So
independent amalgamated.
Their independent amalgamated frustration mounts sound perfect for my next project.
I will just say I did a search. Ryan Higher Ed. You are not the first result, so you've got some work to do.
Okay, I'm on it.
Let's see where. I don't think you're on the first page.
Yeah, what are you going to do? Too common a name.
Yeah, you're going to have to do some work here and take some of these people down. So you're going to have to go meet with them and then do a well actually and put them in their place.
You got it.
So, yeah, I'm not.
All right, guest host, take us home.
All right. Well, this has been the AV-IT Amplifier, and we'll be back next week with more people you want to hear and amplify or something along those lines. Take it away, voiceover guy. Thank you for listening to the AV IT Amplifier. Join us again for next week's episode when we'll welcome a new guest who you'll want to hear from. We promise. Your host has been Ryan Gray. He's on the tweeters at Ryan_A_Gray, or find him on LinkedIn to connect. Please subscribe and give the show a rating and review wherever you get your podcasts. This show is brought to you by HigherEdAV.com. The views expressed here are not necessarily those of our respective institutions, employers, or sponsors. Everyone hang in there, go easy, and we'll be back next week.